Also, question for you, particularly if you're a Labour supporter, what is going on at the top of the Labour Party when it comes to Brexit? Yesterday, the boss, Jeremy Corbyn, said this in a speech to trade unions.
We won't allow Johnson to dictate the terms, and I can tell you this, we're ready for that election. We're ready to unleash the biggest people-powered campaign we've ever seen in this country and in this movement. And in that election, we will commit to a public vote with a credible option to leave and the option to remain.
Well, at 10 o'clock this morning, to those same trade unions, Labour's Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer said pretty much the same thing, as you'd expect. Also at 10 o'clock in a different venue, the Deputy Leader, Tom Watson, appeared to completely contradict the boss and the shadow Brexit Secretary, saying this.
Very difficult though it was, I and many others respected the result of the 2016 referendum for a very long time. But there eventually comes a point, and we are very far past it now, when circumstances are so changed, when so much new information has emerged, when so many people now feel differently, there comes a point when you have to say, actually, no. That years-old plebiscite is no longer a valid basis on which to take such a momentous decision about the future of the United Kingdom. The only proper way to proceed in such circumstances is to consult the people again in a referendum with a credible option to leave and remain on the ballot paper, as Labour have committed to do.
So what's going on? Let's talk to Ayesha Hazarika, who writes for London's Evening Standard newspaper and was an advisor to a number of Labour figures, including Ed Miliband and Harriet Harman. I would like to... Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to ask you, first of all, about the news from the court in Edinburgh, which has ruled that Boris Johnson's suspension of Parliament is unlawful. This reaction has just come in from the government. We are disappointed by today's decision and will appeal to the UK Supreme Court. The government needs to bring forward a strong domestic legislative agenda. Proroguing, suspending Parliament is the legal and necessary way of delivering this. Your reaction to this ruling, first of all?
Well, I think the court ruling in Scotland is just confirming what a lot of sensible people think. You know, I don't think the government has been honest with people. I think if they had actually just said, look, we want to prorogue Parliament because we're in trouble on Brexit, people like me might not have liked it, but at least they would be honest about it. It's the fact that
the High Court last week ruled that the suspension was not illegal.
We will have to wait and see what the Supreme Court, which kind of is the final adjudicator on this, says on Tuesday. Just remember, though, when Gina Miller took that court case, which eventually forced MPs to have the vote on the withdrawal agreement, that had failed in the early sort of round. So I think this is quite an encouraging sign. But I think people need to be calm until we see the result on Tuesday. Although there is a question, should MPs come back to Parliament? Because there's a lot of work going on. Just take our minds away from Brexit, something like the domestic abuse bill. Very, very important.
Massive
bill.
Issue for our audience.
Absolutely. And also across party. You know, there's an event last night marking the Margaret Atwood book. Lots of feminists in the room saying, why are really important issues like this being sort of thrown away because of this Brexit shenanigans?
OK. Would you expect MPs to be getting on trains over the next 24 hours to come to Parliament?
I hope they will, and I think they should do. Yesterday we saw an interesting thing where Yvette Cooper, who heads up the Home Affairs Select Committee, even though they weren't doing it in Parliament, they sort of did one sort of kind of shadow thing. So I think MPs have got to be very careful about not just going off on holiday and chillaxing during this period of time. I think they need to show the public that they're ready to get their shirt sleeves rolled up.
Surely no one is going off on holiday.
I don't know, but I just think, you know, I think MPs have got to really be very
just come
careful.
back from holiday.
I know, but I think they've got to be very careful about that.
OK, let's talk about Labour's Brexit position, or rather the boss's position and his Brexit secretary, and the deputy's position. What's going on?
So real divisions at the top of Labour, which is a shame because I think Labour's had a very good week. You know, some of the stoniest critics of Jeremy Corbyn have said to me, you know what, fair play to him. He's played an absolute blinder this week. He put Boris Johnson right in where he wants him. He didn't fall into that massive elephant trap of calling an early election. But the tragedy is Labour, having been in quite a strong united position, are now again sort of tearing themselves apart over this Brexit position. Tom Watson is now saying that he doesn't think we should have a general election first. We should have a people's vote, a second referendum, to try and sort of get Brexit out the way so we can then get on with the domestic agenda. Jeremy Corbyn is saying, no, I want to have a general election first. He is also basically saying, look, we should still almost have two options on the table. He's even suggesting that he wouldn't have an official Labour Party position. He would allow MPs to campaign which way they wanted. My worry for the Labour Party is, if we've learned anything from the European elections, is that the voters are rewarding parties with clear positions on Brexit,
so
like
position...
the Brexit Party or the Liberal Democrats.
And this is very confusing.
It is confusing.
Which is the right approach? Is it Jeremy Corbyn's or is it Tom Watson's?
Well, I think they've both got good intentions. My bigger question is Labour, eventually Labour has to pick a side, whether it's in a people's vote or whether it's at a general election. You can't just, be all things to all people. It's a bit like the film Highlander. There can only be one position. I think Labour has got to come down on the side of being Remain. With
a general election first?
Well, yes. And if there was a people's vote, I don't think there will be a people's vote first, but if there was, then I think they should be supporting remaining in the EU. That's what John McDonnell, who's the Shadow Chancellor, would like to do. That's what Diane Abbott, who's a very close ally of Jeremy Corbyn. These are not Blairites, by the way. The truth is, we've got to the stage now where there's no sort of good Brexit, where there's no easy win for Brexit. There's no clear majority for one type of Brexit. It's snarling the country up. Jeremy Corbyn unveiled a really interesting package on reforms for workers' rights yesterday at the TUC in Brighton. Very good stuff. But all of that is getting obscured by Brexit. We have got to sort Brexit out before we can do all the other stuff.
I'm going to talk to a Labour voter in a moment. I've been asking on Twitter for Labour voters' views. Geordie Ingham, general election first, because with a minority government, nothing will ever get done.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Labour Outrider says, I wonder why Tom Watson wants to put off a general election. Could possibly be the same reason as the Lib Dems. Claire says, I agree with Tom Watson. A general election shouldn't be a single issue vote, and we are also very likely to end up with a hung parliament again. So we'll be in exactly the same position. Charlotte says it's quite clear what Tom Watson's doing, trying to undermine Jeremy Corbyn. Right, pause there if I may. I'm going to talk to Marianne in just a moment. Before we speak to Marianne, we're going to get some more reaction to this news from Edinburgh that Boris Johnson's suspension of Parliament is unlawful, according to 3 judges at the Inner House at the Court of Session. The government's already said it will appeal. They're disappointed with the decision, they say.